This is Mutable Instruments Elements. It is a modal synthesizer. Now, what is a modal synthesizer? Well, it's physical modelling. It's one version of physical modelling. It's called that because it's physical modelling is basically describing physical objects in the real world mathematically, and it's a mathematical expression, modal. The basis of this synthesis is to take an unpitched sound, and that's important when dealing with this this particular module, because quite a few tutorials I've seen on this kind of don't really explain this very well. So it takes an unpitched sound, sends it through a bank of tuned resonant filters, and those tuned resonant filters are the modes that we're talking about in modal synthesis, but you don't really need to know that. It's just for your information. And it's sent to this, so this side is where you are producing the unpitched noises. This side is what is known as the resonator, and the resonator is pitched, so you can make tunes using the resonator. It's not the actual sounds production side itself that's pitched, it's the resonator side that is pitched. And the important parts of this process, the important part is this knob here. This is marked geometry. Now what that is the actual material that the sounds, the unpitched sounds, are sent through a material. Now if you think about this one here is marked bow, so you'll be producing bowed sounds. Now you would normally bow a string, and in the geometry there are string sounds, and it's the string that gets pitched. You don't pitch the bow when you're playing the violin, you pitch the string. So this is consistent with real world physics. There is an important aspect to this particular module in that you have to trigger the sounds. There has to be a gate present. So if I take the gate away and just send pitch information, nothing happens. If I send gates as well, so you must send a gate. You can send a gate without the pitch. But not pitch without the gate. You'll notice that when I hit the pressure points, the little light here marked play, mark that sends a gate so that you can set it up without having to mess about. Okay, so we'll start looking at the sections. So this first section, as I say, is the sound generator. Unpitched sounds. The white knob is marked bow, the red knob blow, the green knob strike. And that's what they are. This is a bowing sound, and this is the mixer. It's not just a gain control on the bow, it's actually also the bow pressure. So it does get louder, but there's also more pressure on the bow sound. The blow is just is simply a gain control. The strike, once you get past about 2 o'clock, some of the striking sound bleeds out from the resonator, so you get a bit more percussiveness in the sound. With the bow, you have just 2 controls. There's the bow pressure and the timbre, which is kind of changes the character of the sound. When this is sent to the resonator, there's a geometry control here. I've got it set at the moment to be it's bowing a string, but it doesn't have to bow a string. It can bow whatever we have in this in the module. And counterclockwise, you've got a series of plates. So you're bowing plates. Into strings. It then moves on to bars and tubes. If you think about it, tubes are sort of trumpets and flutes, so you can send the blow sound through those to make more natural sounds. And then at the top you have bells and bowls, which are very useful for the striking sounds. If you notice, the perceived pitch changes in the geometry. And this is consistent with real-world physics. But you need to be careful when you're modulating the geometry control that if you go outside of the range for whatever type of material you're in, it does change the pitch, perceived pitch. So you need to keep retuning. It's as I say, it's perfectly consistent with the real world. So, and this is what you're trying to emulate with physical modelling. So you have geometry. So in this case, we've got a bow on a string. There's a brightness control. You can hear that. I'll set it to about the middle. There's damping. This one got me a little bit at first because I expect it to be more damping as you turn it up, but it's the other way around. It starts fully damped and then lets more sound through. It doesn't matter. It's just what I expected when I was first using the control. I've got used to it now, but it fooled me. It kept fooling me at the beginning. I always put that so we get. And this control here is position. Now this, in the case of the bow, this would be the position, and I've set it for a string, the position on the string that the bow is bowing. But obviously with blow and strike, it would be the position where you're blowing and striking. And final control on the resonator side is the space, and this is the stereo width and stereo amount, and it also has a lovely lush reverberation at the top end. So at the very bottom, what happens here is these two outputs, they send separately the unpitched sound and the resonator sound on separate outputs, so you can process them outside of the module if you wish. You then start getting wider and wider in the stereo field until you start to get reverb and up full. Lovely lush reverb there. I'll take it down to, you can use the damping control a bit like a VCA, just turn it off. So that's the blow. Sorry, that's the bowing. So we go to the blow. So this is very much a gain control at the top. It actually controls the amount of granular noise that you're sending through. It has the effect of being gain, really. There's then a flow control, and this is the airflow, and it's kind of, see if I can. It's almost like a wavetable scanner through. Well, it is a wavetable scanner through various colours of noise. So you're controlling the amount of noise there and the type of noise here, and then the timbre of the noise. There you can hear that sweeping through, almost like sweeping through a wavetable there. Position has quite an effect on this particular. Almost get like phasing and flanging going on there. All of these parameters, these 5 knobs, these bottom 5 knobs, have dedicated attenuverters on a modulation input. Really handy. In fact, the only thing, there's an FM input here. There's the coarse and fine tuning, which of course are the volt octave input. The only thing that doesn't have any modulation is the mixer section here. I'll go on to the contour, this contour knob in a minute. I'll just finish off the sounds. Okay, so now we're on strike. Start with some with this one, the brightness really does affect the sound. you're getting physical models of mallets. Which of course you can damp. There's plectrums. And bouncy things, as I call them. There's a lot of variation in there. And of course you can mix the three together to make your own sounds up. Now we'll talk about the contour. If you're at all familiar with streams and the shape knob on streams, Mutable Instruments streams, in the envelope section you've got a shape knob that does, it's very, very similar to that in that you have so you have, let me see if I can get this right. You have decay envelopes here. You move into, they get slightly longer and slower, and then you move into ADSR envelopes, and then you finally move into AR envelopes. The sustain sections are the gate. And obviously they will be affected by the damping. I've taken the damping off completely so you can hear the release. So there you just have a simple AR envelope, there's no sustain on that. It's around about 12 o'clock you start to get the sustain, the gate affecting the sustain. It's very, very powerful and elegant solution to just have that one knob there. It really is good. And that is it really. That's all she said. It's I do get a little bit annoyed by some of the videos that I see on YouTube. There are some content providers out there who clearly don't really want you to know as much as they know. I don't pretend to be an expert. I say that in all my videos. I'm not an expert, and anyone who pretends to be is really not worth watching. When I first got Elements, I watched a couple of videos by some well-known content providers, and when I started using it, what they were saying was clearly wrong. That whole thing, part of the whole understanding of this module is that this section is unpitched, and this is the pitched part, it's the resonator. And so many of them seem to, you get a sound and you're mangling it in the resonator. No, that's not what's happening at all. It's the geometry control is really key to getting the best out of this, because it's the material that you're actually exciting with the sounds, the unpitched sounds here. So really what is happening is it's the geometry control that is being pitched, not the sound that's being produced here. And as I said earlier, that is consistent with the real world, because you don't pitch the bow, you pitch the string, and you shorten and lengthen the string to make higher and lower tones. That's how a stringed instrument works, as I'm sure you know. And so you get the sound, the exciter in the case of, say, a violin would be the bow, scratches the string, which we have in our geometry, and using fingering techniques you would have damping and all these, the space, the place that you're actually performing that violin in, the brightness, that would work hand in hand with the geometry. With a stringed instrument, the brightness can be affected by the size and shape of the instrument, the type of string being used. There's all kinds of things, and you can very much emulate this. It's quite easy once you kind of get your head around that part of it to start to actually get some quite nice realistic violin sounds. You start putting very gentle modulations into some of these things, and it's worth taking each one. Be very careful when, as I say, when modulating the geometry, because it can affect the perceived pitch quite drastically. I'm not saying don't do it, because there are no rules with this, but if you're trying to do pitched things, if you're in that section of the geometry, say, that has strings, you need to try and keep the modulation within that section, not straight outside, because you start getting, I can hear the way the perceived pitch is changing on that, as I'm changing the different materials. And as I said, that was consistent with the real world. So being careful if you're doing using pitch for this, and not just, obviously if you're doing drone type of things, it really doesn't really matter too much. But if you're doing things that are reliant on pitch, generally speaking, the geometry can be relatively static. Everything else is up for grabs. It really is good. There's also, did I mention the FM? There is frequency modulation on this, with its own attenuverter here. The input's over here, and there's a strength control. Now this is kind of it kind of has a VCA type effect. It amplifies, depending on the strength of the CV coming into it, it amplifies or attenuates the signal, and it's negative CV, negative voltages to attenuate, positive voltages to boost, and again, it gives you can use it subtly, and you can give everything a little bit of life. It's at the wild voltages, you can kind of get a lot of pulsing sounds. It really is quite a useful control. All of these, when this comes stock, these are just these knobs are just black. These ones at the bottom, I bought these covers for them because A, I find them aesthetically pleasing, and B, it does help to identify which, particularly in this section, which are the bow, blow and strike attenuverters for when I'm adjusting the sound. Really flexible. One of my favourite modules. But I was saying about gatekeeping, and I diverged, didn't I? As I do, as you'll find out if you watch enough of my videos. Yeah, and I get really annoyed by these guys who they just tell you enough, and then they'll do another video with a little bit more in it and a little bit more, and drip feeding the information, but never giving you the full story. And I think it's about time it stopped, to be honest. They're quite dishonest, some of them. They say they're not reviewing. But if you're the first person to show a module to everybody else, it's a review. And if every time you only like modules, you never say anything negative about them, then You know, what is the point? There aren't very many modules where you say, "Oh, I wish I had this. I wish you had that." This is one of the few on mine. Although there is one thing I would quite like to have modulation on the contour. I do find sometimes as a performance thing, you move this around to get. It's an interesting thing to happen. It would have been nice to have. I personally would have rather have had that than the FM. That's just personal preference. A lot of people would like their FM, so they'll just go no. Fair enough, fair play to them. I certainly would keep the strength. It's a really good. Once I hadn't not until really recently I started really using it, and it really surprised me how effective it was. So let's set something up and just get it to play something nice and musical, and yeah, let's go.